Crockett did something inside the House Oversight Committee room that nobody in Washington was ready for. She placed a single document on the table in front of her. No folder, no stack of papers, just one sheet with a Department of Justice header and a timestamp that made three of Patel's lawyers visibly tense up. She didn't announce it. She didn't dramatically hold it up. She just placed it there face down and asked Kash Patel a question so direct and so carefully built that the room understood right away. This wasn't a congressional hearing anymore. This was a formal questioning, and Patel had just walked into it without realizing the door had already closed behind him. What happened in the next 19 minutes will be shown on every major news channel by tomorrow morning. Not because of what Patel said, but because of what he refused to say. And the difference between those two things, that gap, that silence, tells you everything you need to understand about what is hidden inside the FBI's internal messages from the first 60 days of Patel's time in charge. Stay with us until the end, because the last document she pulled out didn't just change the mood of the room, it changed the whole question entirely. The House Oversight Committee morning session, the kind of Washington event that fills the least watch time slot on C-SPAN. Routine government review, boring accountability theater. The kind of hearing where FBI directors show up with 4 lawyers and a prepared set of non-answers that technically satisfy the record while revealing absolutely nothing. Kash Patel arrived at 9002. He looked comfortable. That was his first mistake. He had reason to be comfortable. The previous 90 minutes had gone exactly as his team planned. There were routine questions about computer security systems, a short exchange about staff changes that Patel dodged easily by saying it involved ongoing sensitive operations. One Republican member used his time to praise FBI field agent hiring numbers. Patel smiled, nodded, and offered reassurances. His lawyers uncapped their pens once and never used them. Jasmine Crockett of Texas was given her turn to speak at 11:40 a.m. For those who don't know her, Crockett is a former public defender. Before that, she handled civil rights cases in Dallas County Federal Court for nearly 10 years. She has questioned police chiefs, sitting judges, and corporate executives under oath. So, here's the deal. How are we supposed to trust you when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now sending resources so that they can go and act as ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. And even when it came down to someone that you consider to be a friend, you were out having some fancy dinner, and you posted not only once incorrectly, but twice incorrectly when it comes to catching somebody. And then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their own child, it seems like you all wouldn't have gotten there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing, except for trying to put on a show for the person running things, or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this happened, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at an HBCU. They were targeted. Yet, I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, Black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I haven't heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem, the one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're working and as they're worshiping in their churches. She does not ask questions she doesn't already know the answers to. She does not bring documents she hasn't read 3 times. And she doesn't raise her voice because she doesn't have to. When Jasmine Crockett goes quiet, that is when the room gets nervous. She placed the single document face down on the table in front of her. She looked at Patel. Director Patel, she began, her voice carrying the steady calm of someone who had already won. I want to start with something simple. Walk me through the FBI's internal communications process for director-level decisions. Specifically, when you make a decision that affects an active investigation, how is that decision written down? Patel settled in. This was familiar ground. Every important decision by the director creates records through our standard records management system. Instructions are logged, sent to relevant division heads, and kept according to federal record-keeping requirements. Good. So there is always a paper trail. Crockett smiled. It was not a warm smile. Congressman, she said quietly. She let him sit with that correction for exactly 2 seconds. And that paper trail, it would include any communication between your office and outside parties about the status of active or ongoing investigations. Correct. Patel nodded. Coordination between agencies is written down through the proper channels. Yes. What about messages with private lawyers? Patel's right hand moved almost invisibly toward the water glass in front of him, then stopped. Standard legal advice is handled through the FBI's Office of General Counsel. Crockett nodded slowly. She didn't look at the document in front of her. She didn't need to. Director Patel, are you familiar with the set of internal messages listed under review case number OPR 2025-60130? It was created during a 63-day period beginning the week you were confirmed. The first real pause. Not long, maybe 3 seconds, but everyone in that room felt it. Senator, Congressman. His jaw tightened visibly. Without seeing the specific file number, I can't speak to a particular review file. Crockett placed her hand flat on the face-down document. Let me help with that. She flipped it over. The FBI letterhead was visible from the press area. So was the classification label across the top. Not the highest level, but enough. Enough to make one of Patel's lawyers lean forward and whisper something that Patel acknowledged with the smallest possible movement of his left hand. This, Crockett said, is an internal review memo, prepared by the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, dated February 19th of this year. It records a series of communications, 38 documented contacts over a 51-day window between your office and a legal group outside the Bureau. She looked up. Those 38 contacts were not sent through the FBI's Office of General Counsel. They don't appear in any interagency log. And according to this memo, they were done using a device not registered to your official FBI account. The room went still. Patel's face had not changed, but his hands were flat on the table now, pressing down, and his breathing had become slightly faster and slightly shallower. Anyone trained to notice would have caught it. The cameras definitely did. Director Patel, Crockett's voice was steady, almost gentle. Can you explain why 38 communications with an outside legal party during an active period of case review were done off the official channels? Senator? Congressman, I appreciate the question, but without reviewing the full details of whatever document you're referencing, I'm not in a position to. You're not in a position. Crockett repeated the phrase without any emotion. She let it sit there. The director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is not in a position to explain his own communications. She paused. Okay, let me give you some context. Then, she reached beneath the desk and brought out a second document. This one was thicker, a stapled set of pages, maybe 14 sheets. She didn't hold it up. She set it beside the first one and opened to a marked page. According to a records request fulfilled by the Department of Justice Inspector General's office 11 days ago, the outside legal group contacted through those 38 off-channel communications is registered to a firm with active involvement in 4 ongoing federal cases that your bureau is responsible for. Investigating. One of those cases involves financial transactions totaling approximately $1.7 billion in flag transfers reviewed during a 2023 Treasury review. A review, Director Patel, that your office paused in January of this year, 14 days after the first of those 38 contacts. Patel opened his mouth, closed it. Crockett continued. Now, here is what I find interesting. Before this committee, in written testimony submitted last month, you stated, and I'm quoting from the record, that no decisions regarding the pause of pending financial investigations were influenced by any outside communication. She looked up. That was your written testimony under oath. Yes, and you stand by that. I stand by all of my testimony. For a moment, nobody moved. Not Crockett, not Patel, not the staff members lined up against the back wall who had stopped pretending to look at their phones. There is a specific kind of silence that falls inside a hearing room when a witness has just made a promise they don't fully understand yet. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It lands quietly, almost politely, and then the person who set the trap picks up the next piece of paper. Crockett looked at Patel for 3 full seconds without speaking. She was not reading. She was not checking her notes. She was watching him hold the weight of what he had just said. Patel kept his face neutral, professional, and calm. His left hand remained flat against the table. His jaw was set. He had given the answer his lawyers prepared him to give, and he believed it would hold. It wouldn't hold. Because what Crockett was about to read wasn't an interpretation. It wasn't a political argument or a committee staffer's memo. It was a 2-line note written by Patel's own agency inside a review that his own office had been told about. In language so specific it left no room for the careful non-answer he had just tried to use. She reached for the document again, page 9. She slid it forward across the desk, placing it so the C-SPAN camera could capture it clearly. Right there in the margin, a timestamp, a reference code, and a 2-line note from the OPR review team. She read it out loud without looking up. Quote, communications reviewed during this review period appeared to match in timing with the pause directive issued to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Division on January 14th. End quote. The room was completely quiet. Director Patel, she said, that is your own bureau's internal review finding a connection between your off-channel contacts and the pause of $1 billion financial investigation. That is not partisan politics. That is not a press statement. That is the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility recording a timeline that your written testimony directly contradicts. Patel's lawyer was whispering urgently. Now Patel's eyes moved to him, then back to Crockett, then to the documents on her desk. The water glass in front of him remained untouched. He didn't trust his hands enough to pick it up. "Congressman," Patel said, his voice controlled but carrying something underneath it. A tightness, a careful hold on something that wanted to come out. "I want to be very clear. Any suggestion that I paused a legitimate federal investigation because of outside pressure is not only factually incorrect, it is a serious misrepresentation of how the Bureau operates." Crockett waited 3 full seconds of silence. "I didn't suggest it. I read it from your own agency's review." She closed the second document. She set both pages flat and folded her hands on top of them. "Let me ask you something direct, Director Patel. Yes or no, did you know at the time you submitted your written testimony that this OPR review existed?" Senator, "Congressman, yes or no? I was aware of various internal review processes." "Yes or no, Director Patel?" The silence that followed lasted 11 seconds. 11 full seconds. The C-SPAN clock was visible in the corner of the broadcast screen. 3 reporters in the press area stopped writing and looked up. "I was aware," Patel finally said, "that certain administrative review processes were ongoing." Crockett didn't move. "So, when you testified that no decisions were influenced by outside communication, you knew there was an active internal review looking at that exact question. And you testified anyway. It wasn't a question. She didn't deliver it as one. The room understood. Here is what the record shows. 38 off-channel contacts. A 51-day window. A billion-dollar investigation paused 14 days after the first contact. An internal OPR review that connected those 2 facts. And a director who, under oath before this committee, testified that none of it happened. 3 things. A timeline, a pause, a testimony. You can decide what to call that. But Jasmine Crockett already has a word for it, and she put it in a formal referral to the House Judiciary Committee before the session was even closed. The documents are in the congressional record now. The OPR memo, the timeline, the testimony that contradicts both. Kash Patel walked into that room this morning with 4 lawyers and a prepared set of non-answers designed to dodge every question. He didn't account for one thing. Jasmine Crockett doesn't just ask questions. She builds rooms and then she closes the door. This isn't over. More documents are scheduled to be released through the Inspector General's office in the coming weeks. More hearings are already being scheduled. And the question that Patel couldn't answer today, that 11-second silence, is going to follow him into every single one of them. If you understand why that silence matters, share this right now. Because what you just watched isn't the end of this story, it is the beginning of the part that can't be buried. Something happened inside the House Oversight Committee that most people watching the hearing didn't immediately realize. At first glance, it looked like just another routine congressional exchange. Another day in Washington, another hearing where officials give carefully prepared answers while lawyers sit behind them, making sure nothing too revealing slips out. But then Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett did something that changed the entire mood of the room. She placed a single sheet of paper on the table. No stack of documents, no dramatic speech, just one document with the Department of Justice header and a timestamp. She set it down face down, and then she asked Kash Patel a question. A very specific question. What happened in the next 19 minutes turned what was supposed to be a routine oversight hearing into something that looked much more like a formal legal questioning. And by the end of that exchange, the most important moment wasn't something Patel said. It was something he didn't say. Because sometimes in Washington, silence tells you more than any answer ever could. The hearing that was supposed to be routine. The setting was the United States House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, morning session. The kind of routine hearing that usually fills the quiet hours of C-SPAN programming. Government review, bureaucratic oversight, policy questions that rarely make big news. Patel arrived confident. He had every reason to be. The first 90 minutes had gone exactly the way his legal team expected. Members asked routine questions about computer security systems. Another exchange focused on staff changes inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Patel dodged most of those questions by pointing to sensitive operations and ongoing investigations. One Republican member even used his time to praise FBI hiring numbers. Patel smiled, nodded, and reassured the committee. His lawyers barely had to speak. Everything was going according to plan. And then Crockett was given her turn to speak. Why Jasmine Crockett was different. For people who have followed her career, this moment wasn't surprising. Before entering Congress, Crockett worked as a public defender, Before that, she spent nearly 10 years handling civil rights cases in federal court in Dallas. She has questioned police chiefs, corporate executives, and judges, people under oath, and there's something important about her approach. She doesn't ask questions she doesn't already know the answer to. She doesn't bring documents she hasn't studied carefully, and she doesn't raise her voice. When Jasmine Crockett goes quiet, that's when the room starts paying attention. The question that changed the room, Crockett began calmly. She criticized Patel's staffing plans for the FBI. She questioned his decision to send certain staff toward immigration enforcement work. She also raised concerns about the Bureau's response to extremist violence and domestic terrorism. But that wasn't the real moment. The real moment came when she turned to the document sitting on the table face down. She looked at Patel and asked a question that seemed simple but wasn't. Dr. Patel, walked me through the FBI's internal communications process for director-level decisions. Specifically, she asked, when the director makes a decision affecting an active investigation, how is that decision written down? Patel answered easily. Major decisions, he explained, create records through the Bureau's records management system. Instructions are logged, sent to division heads, and kept according to federal record-keeping rules. In other words, there's always a paper trail. Crockett nodded. Then she asked another question. Would that record-keeping include messages with outside parties about ongoing investigations? Patel said yes. Communications between agencies are written down through official channels. Then she asked a slightly different question. What about messages with private lawyers? For the first time, Patel hesitated slightly. He explained that legal advice typically goes through the FBI's Office of General Counsel. Crockett nodded again. And then she asked the question that changed everything. The internal review. She asked if Patel was familiar with a case file inside the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility, a review file created during the first 60 days after he became director. Patel paused for only a few seconds, but inside a hearing room, that kind of pause is noticeable. He said he couldn't comment on a specific review without seeing the document. That's when Crockett flipped the paper over. From the press area, reporters could see the FBI letterhead. They could also see the classification label across the top. Not the highest level, but serious enough that Patel's lawyers leaned forward immediately. Crockett explained what the document was. An internal review memo dated February 19th, prepared by the Office of Professional Responsibility. According to the memo, investigators recorded 38 communications between Patel's office and an outside legal group. 38 contacts over 51 days. And here's the key detail. Those communications were not sent through the official FBI legal channels. They did not appear in any interagency logs, and the review suggested they were done using a device not registered to Patel's official FBI account. The room became very quiet. The billion-dollar investigation. Crockett then brought out a second document. This one was thicker, about 14 pages. It referenced a records request fulfilled by the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General. According to that request, the outside legal group contacted by Patel's office represented interests connected to 4 federal investigations. One of those investigations involved financial transfers totaling approximately $1.7 billion, transactions flagged during a Treasury review in 2023. And that investigation had been paused 14 days after the first off-channel communication took place. Patel began to respond, but Crockett kept speaking. She reminded the committee that Patel had previously submitted written testimony stating that no investigative decisions were influenced by outside communications. She asked him directly, did he stand by that statement? Patel said yes, he stood by his testimony. The silence. Then Crockett read something from the internal memo, a 2-line note written by the FBI's own review team. It noted that the timing of Patel's off-channel communications matched the pause order issued to the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division, not a political accusation, an internal observation. Crockett looked at Patel and asked one final question. Did he know that this internal review existed when he submitted his written testimony? At first, he tried to answer carefully. He said he was aware that various administrative review processes were ongoing. Crockett interrupted, yes or no. The room fell silent. Not dramatic silence, the quiet kind. The kind first ever when it stands something important just happened. The C-SPAN clock kept running. 11 seconds passed. Finally, Patel said he was aware that internal reviews were underway, and that was the moment. Because Crockett had just established 3 facts on the record. 38 off-channel contacts, a billion-dollar investigation paused shortly afterward, and testimony stating that no outside communications influenced investigative decisions. Those 3 facts now exist together in the congressional record. By the end of the hearing, Crockett had already prepared a formal referral to the United States House Judiciary Committee. The documents she introduced are now part of the official record. The Office of Inspector General is expected to release more materials in the coming weeks. More hearings are already being scheduled, and the 11 seconds of silence that followed Crockett's question will likely come up again and again. Because in congressional investigations, the most damaging moment isn't always the accusation. It's the point where a witness has to decide whether to answer or stay silent. And sometimes that silence becomes the entire story. Every day we research and explain major stories, from White House developments in Congress to elections, Supreme Court decisions, international relations, and economic trends, so you can understand what's really happening beyond the headlines. But here, you're only seeing part of the story. For deeper analysis, exclusive videos, and behind-the-scenes insights, join our community on Patreon. The link is in the description or chat. On Patreon, members get exclusive content, deeper analysis, and behind-the-scenes insights that we don't share anywhere else.